Greetings and welcome to Crown Recaps. Today I'm going to discuss the drama picture, Room. Keep an eye out and be cautious. Joy, who is 24 years old, shares a small room with her son Jack. In one corner, there is a toilet and bathroom, while in the other, there is a makeshift kitchen. Because of the restricted room, the mother and son share a single bed. It only has a skylight that functions as a window, and the door requires a passcode to enter. Jack has never left the room in his entire life. Joy, his mother, was kidnapped 7 years ago and has been held captive in the same room ever since. Because of the kidnapper, Joy was subjected to sexual assault, which resulted in the birth of Jack. The kid's only source of entertainment is an ancient television that he believes is a magic box. He thinks the people within the television are aliens from another planet with trees and animals. The picture begins with Jack waking up and greeting the inanimate things in the room, such as the chair, wardrobe, and sink. He has formed friends with the objects in the room because he has only seen 2 people in his life. The child has no idea of space and believes that his or her room is the only thing that exists. Joy has never told him about the outside world to avoid having to explain the unpleasant reality of his life. Old Nick is the abductor's moniker. According to the two, every night he comes to Joy and sexually attacks her. She's become used to it after 7 years of suffering. He also delivers them required groceries and occasionally buys them clothes. Today is Jack's 5th birthday and he is overjoyed. His mother makes him a cake out of whatever they have on hand. Jack is delighted to be getting something he's only ever seen on TV, but he's unhappy to discover there are no candles on the cake. Joy should have asked Old Nick for candles for their Sunday treat, he insists. Joy claims she can only ask for necessities from him. When it gets dark, she forces Jack to sleep in a small cupboard, since it is usual. She does this to spare the child from witnessing Old Nick beating her. When the abductor enters the room, Jack keeps an eye on him via the cabinet slats. He is afraid to leave the house since he knows the man hurts his mother. A rotten tooth slips out of Joy's mouth the next day when she is eating breakfast. She gives it to her son, who carries it around in his mouth. They only had a piece of toast for breakfast. The child expresses a desire for something more to eat, but Joy remains silent, knowing that this is all she can offer him. Jack is pleased to see a beautiful new toy vehicle on the table when he wakes up the next morning. It was a birthday present from his grandfather, Nick. Old Nick, Jack believes, is a magician who can pull objects from the television. He spends the entire day driving the automobile around the room. 2 shout at the ceiling for about an hour, attempting to get someone's attention, but nothing occurs. Later in the conversation, Jack introduces his fictitious pet dog Lucky. Joy upsets him by telling him that Lucky isn't real. When Joy is distracted, Jack spots a mouse for the first time in his life on the floor. He reaches out to touch it, but Joy notices and pushes him away. He's disappointed because the mouse is the only animal he's ever seen. Joy leaves the toaster oven on by accident while making dinner that night, and it catches fire. She hurriedly switches it off and attempts to mask the odor in the hopes that Old Nick won't notice. When he comes around at night, though, he smells the burnt cheese right away. He gets irritated and starts calling her names. When she responds with a snarky remark, he becomes enraged and nearly punches her. He was laid off from his job 6 months ago and is barely able to support the 3 of them. Jack makes an attempt to ignore the talk, but accidentally makes a noise. When Old Nick spots him, he tries to open the cabinet door so he can see him. Joy invites him to the bed to keep him from talking to her son. Jack emerges from his cabinet later that night and tiptoes over to the 2 of them. Nick, who is awake at the time, notices the child. He goes for Jack, but Joy blocks him with her body, keeping him from touching her son. Nick, outraged, threatens to kill her and rushes away, leaving behind a crying Jack. As he sobs in her arms and apologizes for coming out of the cabinet, Joy calms him. The room is uncomfortably cold the next morning. Joy discovers that their heater is turned off, implying that Old Nick has disconnected the shed's electricity source. Joy is well aware that they will not be able to stay in the cold for long. Furthermore, she is concerned that Nick will starve them to death due to a lack of funds. As a result, she sits Jack down and informs him that they are being held captive in a shed by a nasty guy. She informs him that when Old Nick requested her to help him with his sick dog, she was only 17 years old. In the shed, he duped her and kidnapped her. She had previously lived with Jack's grandparents in a house with a hammock. The child refuses to trust her, claiming that trees, houses, and hammocks can only be seen on television. Despite Jack's obstinacy, Joy continues to inform him about the outside world. She even shows him a dried leaf that has fallen on the skylight, but the boy claims that the leaves are still green, implying that she is lying. He asks for the next day, while watching TV, if trees and people are real. Joy patiently explains how the actual world works to him, eventually persuading him to believe her. She doesn't waste any time in devising a plan to flee. She heats water and uses it to make it appear as if Jack is sick. To make him smell horrible, she even forces herself to puke and smears it across the pillow. The child sobs and declares that he does not want to do it. Joy doesn't like seeing him weep, but she doesn't have any other options. When old Nick arrives that night, she informs him that Jack is sick due to the cold. Nick rubs his burning forehead, which is caused by the hot water. He says he'll bring medication the next day and then he's gone. Joy is dissatisfied since she expected him to take Jack to the hospital, where he would have a chance to flee. She comes up with a new idea the next day. She asks Jack to roll himself in a rug and pretend to be dead. She teaches him how to unroll himself and run for assistance. The boy is told that old Nick would take him outside, where he will encounter actual people and will have to ask for help. He is terrified, but he accepts to participate. Joy has already covered Jack inside the rug and is pretending to cry when old Nick arrives a little later. She claims he died in the middle of the night and blames it on old Nick. Nick panics and rushes out the door with the child still coiled up in the rug. He loads him into the bed of his pickup truck and drives away. Jack can hear the truck's engine from within the rug. He untangles himself from the rug, captivated by the first complete sight of the sky. He gently jumps out of the truck as it begins to slow down. Old Nick notices the vehicle and comes to a halt, but Jack has already encountered a man walking his dog. When old Nick tries to return Jack to the van, the man becomes suspicious and threatens to contact the cops. After abandoning the child on the ground, old Nick drives away. Jack remains there until the cops arrive. He tells them about his mother and displays a tooth that belonged to her. Police grasp the gravity of the situation when he reveals that they reside in a shed that they are not allowed to leave. They promptly summon assistance and begin searching for the shed. Joy is rescued only a few hours later, and she is unharmed. She sees her son again and compliments him on his job. After being held captive for 7 years, the two embrace and celebrate their liberation. When Jack wakes up the next day, he is in a hospital room in a bed. He peers out the window, still unable to accept that the world outside is real. Joy and he takes a bath in a shower for the first time. Jack is scared to go under running water, but eventually gets used to it. The doctors perform several tests on them and declare them healthy. They are suggested to wear a lot of sunscreens since they were hardly exposed to sunlight in captivity. Jack is also told to wear sunglasses if the world seems too bright. The kid is nervous to talk to the doctor, so he quietly whispers to Joy if he wants to say something. Joy's parents, Nancy and Robert, finally arrive at the hospital and embrace their long-lost daughter in a tight hug. They had accepted she was never going to return after suddenly disappearing one day. Joy is told that her parents have divorced and her mother is now dating a man named Leo. Following that, Joy and Jack are taken home where a crowd of people and reporters have gathered to witness the return. Jack needs help to walk down the stairs because he is not used to it. He meets Leo, who is delighted to see both of them. After they are settled, Nancy comments that they should cut Jack's hair, but the kid quietly whispers that his strength is in his hair. At dinner, the family enjoys a nutritious meal that is foreign for Jack. He eats ice cream for the first time and experiences a brain freeze. Joy notices that her father hasn't talked to Jack at all. She realizes that he is not comfortable with Jack being his grandchild because he was the product of her being sexually assaulted. Enraged that he is not willing to accept her son, she gets into an argument with him and storms off to her room with Jack. The next day, Joy shows Jack a picture of her and her high school friends. She is clearly annoyed at the fact that their lives turned out to be nice when she was rotting in the hell of a room. Jack has a hard time adjusting to the new life. He never leaves his mother's side and doesn't talk to anyone else. Leo makes the kid comfortable and talks to him like a father, which helps him a lot. Joy falls deep into depression after failing to be happy even after getting out of captivity. She forces Jack to play even when he refuses to and gets into a huge argument with her mother. Some days later, their family's lawyer informs them that they will need money for the upcoming trial, and the easiest way to get some is to do a primetime interview. A journalist shows up at the house to interview Joy. She asks her intrusive questions about self-harm and her relationship with the captor, making her feel worse than she already did. At one point in the interview, Joy is asked why she didn't beg the abductor to leave Jack in an orphanage, implying that she was selfish. The interview has upset her so much that she sinks into depression. The next morning, Jack walks to the bathroom and is horrified to see his mother laying on the ground. Joy has attempted to commit suicide, but she is soon saved by the paramedics. While Joy is admitted to the hospital, Jack is left alone with Nancy and Leo. He begins opening up to them and gets used to being around people. Leo brings his dog home, which excites Jack, who still remembers his imaginary dog, Lucky. One day, Jack tells Nancy he wants to cut his hair and send it to Joy because she needs his strength more than he does. Nancy happily does as he says and gives the boy a neat haircut. At the end of it, the kid tells her that he loves her. Nancy is overwhelmed and hardly manages to whisper back, "I love you." That day, a neighbor's kid calls Jack out to play. He makes a friend for the first time in his life and plays with him in the backyard. At the same time, Joy returns home and smiles while watching him play. When the mother and the son meet, she claims that his hair helped her get well quickly. As time passes, Jack experiences several things with his mother. They go to different restaurants, parks, and places that they didn't get to visit for all those years. They also hang a hammock at the house that Jack had always wanted to play in. As the two are swinging in it, Jack asks to visit the room once. Joy is shocked at the request, but she agrees to take him for a visit. When Jack returns to the place, he comments if it has shrunk since they were last here because he remembers it being bigger. Before leaving, he wishes the objects in the room a goodbye like he used to wish them while in captivity. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.